Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Deep Roots Movement. My name is Yasin. It's a chilly night on the Mediterranean coastline here in Turkey. The other day, I've recently posted a video called Slavery is the Ultimate Riba. And in it, I'm basically freestyling off the top of my head, from my heart, about an issue that troubles me. And in it, I discussed having seen some videos a while back that triggered some thinking about the issue of slavery as riba. I'd never heard this approach before. I'm sure that there have been scholars that have thought about it in the past. We have to make sure that slavery never rises again, not only in the Ummah, but in the world, ever. This is very important. And if you want to get a sense of how important this issue is, if you go and you do a quick search of YouTube videos on Islam and slavery and start reading through the comments, then you're going to get a sense of how sick in the heart the Ummah is right now, making disgusting apologetic arguments showing that Islamic slavery was the righteous kind, the good kind. It was actually good for those black people who had themselves castrated and those women who were sexually exploited. It's horrific. It is so deeply troubling, brothers and sisters. It is so deeply troubling. And, I'm writing a piece on it, working on processing my thoughts and my feelings on this subject. This is something, I grew up in America, in America, in an African-American community. The African diaspora has played a very, very key role in my development as a man and as a human. And this issue is very important. And I'm blown away when I see Western reverts that are defending such a repulsive practice. And then, non-Westerners or Muslims who've been raised in a Western context, and yet they have not actually opened their heart to the suffering of people in a real way. And then they try to contrast, this is Western slavery. This is out of the Christian world. This is an ugly, dirty form of slavery. We have the righteous kind. Wow. See, this is the thing. We have to. Allah is a haq. Allah is truth. This is how I perceive the deity. My Lord is truth. My aim in life is truth and only truth. And everything that I've been through in my life, truth is what kept me going. A compassionate, loving truth. At times I saw truth in a personalized manner, in other ways in a non-personalized manner. And Allah's been teaching me from many different angles. Like I take a holistic approach to life, and I'm very thankful for this. Now you're seeing me in the videos right now. I'm seeing all these crazy things happen in the world, and it's hitting me hard because I'm trying to see how we're going to survive this. We are facing genocide, brothers and sisters, straight up depop to the extreme. And at best, there's supposed to be a small percentage of humanity that is going to survive in an enslaved state. So that means slavery and genocide are the two key issues that we are facing. Not just as an ummah, but as a human community, as a world. This is super important for us to consider, brothers and sisters. I'm just going to be speaking to you from the heart, doing my best to stay on track because, it's easy freestyling to kind of just go on to tangents, and I'm a bit tangential as is. But I'm speaking to you in a sincere manner. And, it's something that informs a lot of my life, like this issue. I've spent so much time dealing with and thinking about and contemplating different aspects of race and what it means to be human and what it means to become a mature human being and issues of slavery and freedom. One of the main reasons that I took Shahada was because I came to understand the issue of economic justice and economic injustice. And for instance, in like I read that book from John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and I saw, how finances and economics were being used to enslave people, to strip nation states of their resources, and basically to indenture whole groups of people, and ultimately to financially and ultimately, materially and even potentially physically enslave people. We're moving in that direction rapidly. We're moving back into a feudal model, it looks like, a one world government model. We have to consider the real ramifications of this. There are a number of issues that I've been presenting recently. One thing we have to consider is that, some of the things that I've been learning about in recent months have been related to our sacred clay and in our relationship to Adam alayhi salam. This is from melanated clay. All colors are within this clay. All groups are within this clay. All individuals. We're many souls from one soul. We're many people from one person on some level. Like, we can discuss what this means, and it's a very interesting topic, but the point is that we are clay, water, ruh, and we are born to be free and sovereign as human beings. And I see tremendous potential for Islam. All right, so I've got some notes pulled up just to try to keep me on track a little bit. But this issue of slavery, it's so important right now. So for instance, I said slavery is the worst of all ribas. I'll define it in a second, but I believe the Ummah was humiliated and colonized, not because of Sufi excesses and popular practices such as grave visitation, not because Muslims neglected to follow sunnahs, nor because the grand synthesis of all arts and sciences begun by earlier Islamic scholars was curtailed too soon, but this is important, but ultimately because of the Ummah's complicity in the harm of walis through the institution of slavery. And slavery is the ultimate riba. All right, so we've got the issue. The two main points are the issue of the wali and not knowing who the wali is, all right, and the issue of what riba is and what slavery is. So there are a number of things connected to this. So I'm saying slavery, riba is slavery. It leads to slavery. It leads to enslavement. And slavery is the ultimate riba because of excessive, unjust profit-taking. We've got the wali factor. We've got the issue of the orphan's wealth, all right? And we'll get to that, but consider that all slaves are ultimately orphaned. They are disconnected from their ancestors, from their lands, from their peoples, from their traditions, often from their languages. They are disconnected from their families, from their social circles, often from their religions. So they are orphans in a very real sense. What we need to do is we need to think, when we're dealing with words, we need to think about word clusters and we need to think about associations and contexts. We need to do the etymology work. We need to study word histories. I am not a scholar, but scholarly methodologies are quite valuable. And thankfully, I have enough education, self-education, and institutional education that I've had to break a lot of conditioning from that, of course, but I've had enough to know that there are certain methodologies that are beneficial to think in a systematic and holistic manner and to think in an intuitive manner. Intuitive reason is one of the strengths of the mature Muslim community and of the mature Muslim. Intuitive reason, it's something that's well known within the Islamic circles and within the Buddhist circles. And there are a lot of interesting connections between Buddhism and Islam. I like to think in comparing and contrasting are very, very helpful in the learning process. So we've got the wali factor, we've got the orphan's wealth that we need to consider. And what are we told Quranically and Hadith-wise about the orphans and taking their wealth? Okay? We've got the issue of flesh taken from the backs of living creatures. We are not allowed to take flesh to nutrify ourselves from a living creature, nor are we allowed to mutilate them. We're not allowed to slit the cattle's ears. And the thing is, even the word we had in the West, we had something called chattel slavery. This is related to property. This is related to chattel is cattle, and head, like head of cattle. So we've got to consider that people, and you can go and you can, one of like, all right, so when we talk about seeking truth is so important. We are looking for how are we going to survive and thrive these difficult times, people. We need to survive. We must survive. We must preserve our clay. We must not let it be tainted by genetic modification whatsoever. No synthetic materials, no nanotechnology. It must be allowed into the body intentionally. Inshallah, we will protect ourselves and protect our babies. This is so important. Now, this is so troubling when we look into this. There's also the issue of that we need to consider when it comes to slavery, the necessity for inflicting unjust, excessive pain to keep slaves in their place. And therefore, sin is brought upon individuals in the community that justifies unjust, mean-spirited, disgusting behaviors. Anytime we have individual sin that becomes collective sin, we have natural law kicks in. We've got cause and effect because we are so deeply connected to the land. We are made of clay and water, as is this world around us. We are in all of Allah's creation is interconnected, and the human, we are special because we are the juncture of all things that are interconnected. And this interconnects at the human heart. And in a purified state, we come into our natural innate abilities that were pre-programmed into us from before the garden, even potentially. Allah made us his personal project. Creation did not just end a long time ago, 6,000 years ago or whenever people say it began 6,000 years. Some people say 70,000 years. Some people say millions of years. What matters is that creation that this world has been here for a long time. Humanity, we have a long history, probably longer than we've imagined. And we have a special destiny. We have a beautiful destiny, inshallah. But we've got to make it through these times, people. And we've got to consider how do we best survive. Now, I mean, I'm giving you this information about why I think that slavery is riba and why it's problematic. But really, the argument that I'm making behind this is that because we have engaged in this riba of slavery as an ummah, that you got to understand that since we're so interconnected with nature, Allah programs things into nature. There's cause and effect because we are interconnected with the natural world, with all the ecosystems. And when people behave in unnatural, unhealthy, sinful ways that are toxic and unhealthy and imbalanced, and they cause imbalances. We cause imbalances. And we negatively impact all the ecosystems around us. We change the vibratic states, the vibrations of things. And there's a cause and effect programmed into the world. And so horrific results happened, like, Sodom and Gomorrah, the flood. It's like creation is ongoing, and certain natural cause and effects will happen when things get imbalanced enough and toxic enough. Maybe you've considered this. It's like in other traditions they talk about karma, and this is cause and effect. You reap what you sow. What comes around goes around. Sometimes if a group of people are engaged in enslaving, raping, harming, then they might actually negatively impact multiple generations of another people that might yearn to bring vengeance upon the people that had harmed their relatives, their ancestors. So this cause and effect, much of this is in the unseen realm. We don't know how things are unleashed. So we say it's from Allah. Now the thing is, it is from Allah, because Allah gives us certain frameworks to work within, and it's always related to ethics and purity, people. So if we are living in an ethical and pure manner, and when we and if Allah is truth, and we seek truth in everything that we do and align our lives toward truth, then inshallah we won't have to deal with negative cause and effect. Won't have to deal with negative consequence, or at least to the extent that we might otherwise. If we are behaving in unethical and impure ways, then we are going to have harsh consequences. This is something to consider strongly. And I started to make the argument in the last video that the Muslim Ummah has done tremendous sin from the slaving industry. Now, one of the things I've noticed, I'm a revert, so I've got a different perspective. I've got an inside outsider, outside insider perspective. I'm thankful for this view of things. And we are, it's like, so I've got a different approach to seeing some things. And I've noticed that in general, Muslims will often, they have like it's like, I've noticed that the Muslims will often have an ideal, and they'll say, okay, well, if anything bad is happening, Muslims are not behaving in a proper Islamic manner, they won't take responsibility for what's going on, but individual Muslims actually represent the Ummah as a whole. And, we have to be truthful and honest with ourselves. Opponents and enemies actually exploit this, and they notice, they notice this apologetic attitude. Oftentimes our da'is, so-called da'is, these people are often, they're engaged in apologetics, making apologies for really dirty things Islamically, or making polemical attacks on others, trying to pull up, like, oh, you say bad things about us, but look, you're worse. Look, Christian slavery was way worse than Islamic slavery. Look, we actually, we ended slavery to a certain extent. We made it of benefit to free slaves. We had rules built in to not harm slaves, to dress them well, to feed them well, to give them the opportunity to gain their freedom. Yeah, that's cool and all. But I'm telling you, go and read the comments. Look at what non-Muslims see that as. Non-Muslims are seeing hypocrisy in us. Big hypocrisy. I hear all these takfiris. They're always like accusing people of being hypocrites. They're always like declaring people non-Muslim, dirty stuff. Most Muslims are not that imbalanced, thankfully, because that's an imbalanced approach, and it's really a close-hearted, close-fisted approach to life, and a close-minded approach. I'm really thankful that we're not doing that overall, but we need to be really honest with ourselves about how we're thinking about things, how we're approaching things. And this is the thing, in order to survive, we're dealing with a black magic spell, people, all across the planet, where they're utilizing various technologies, mind control programs, chemical alteration of the water and the food. Now it's got all kinds of nanotech and all kinds of garbage within it, like in our air, our water. I mean, this is they're taking a holistic approach to devastating and destroying us. And the thing is, check this out, like, it's related. I read the Quran with coming from a Christian background. I read the Bible completely for myself, and in addition to all the different Bible study I grew up with. But when I read the story of Iblis the accursed and the narrative of Adam alayhi salam, I'm reading it with the story of Job in mind, Ayub alayhi salam. And like, basically in the book of Job, we've got a court case where Satan, who is the adversary, he is the enemy, he is the accuser, he is, basically he makes this agreement with Allah, to allow him to prove that Job can be brought to corruption, because Job is a righteous man, and so Satan's going to prove that he can be broken, and he will also succumb to cursing Allah. He will lose his faith. Allah believes in him. It's interesting that we've got this instance of, it's like, I love seeing that Allah believes in us more than we believe in ourselves. That's beautiful to me. And Iblis in the Quran, he accuses us of being murderous. He says that we're going to be murderous and we're going to be corrupters in the earth. And the earth is our flesh, as well as the clay and water around us. So the environment. So we will corrupt the environment we live in, as well as the environment we live in. So we've got this issue of this. I call it the great cosmic court case, Iblis versus Adam alayhi salam and his progeny. And so we're descended from a prophet. We have prophetic flesh. We're from his loins. There's this, his DNA is it's radiant within ours. So this issue of Adam and Iblis in the cosmic court case, what Iblis has done is he and his henchmen, his satanic jinn, the corrupted jinn, which we always have to be careful of differentiating between the Muslim and believing jinn who are seeking righteousness as we are, and those of the shayateen, because they've had a it's implicit within it. If you study human history and you study the Quran, then you realize that they've had an ongoing civil war within the jinn communities. And I want us to consider that that this great cosmic court case, he has corrupted through the secret societies, through these brotherhoods and sisterhoods that also have possession cults within them, oftentimes. He's corrupted a large percentage of humanity, a significant percentage, a chosen elect, if you will. It's kind of like a shadow side of, they use holistic principles, but they use the shadow side of it, the inverse. But it's still, they recognize the interconnections and they exploit that. And many of our strengths, our spiritual and emotional and intellectual strengths, they exploit and use against us. And so they use shadow side holistics, and they've got a fake chosen elect, so it's a very, these brotherhoods, they believe that they're superior. They're jinn supremacists. But they're self-hating humans. They really, because the jinn, the shayateen, the jinn satans, they despise us. They think so lowly of us. And so they whisper in the ears of these corrupt humans who keep on behaving in a repetitive manner, in thought, word, and deed, in corrupt ways, and they seal their hearts over time through blood rituals, various rituals. So ritual suggests repetition, repetitive thought, word, and deed, and repeating an intention over and over again. And Allah grants their prayers and seals their hearts, and then they have a freedom. They are free because they have no conscience. Then they can behave in selfish ways, like as malignant narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths. They can behave in these ways, so they behave with devilry. They are now devils. And then, so Iblis is using these groups of people to actually prove his point that humans are corrupters in the land, that humans are murderous and genocidal maniacs. And so he's proving that we are unworthy. We are not worthy of Allah's favor, according to him. This is not true. It is not accurate. We need to disprove this. So our Lord is truth, not falsity, not falsehood. We do not follow the lie. We do not, we need to beware of deception, and we need to beware of self-deception. It's very important. Every single thing in the Quran, we need to read in a personal way and as a mirror and look at ourselves. Every time you see something that's suggesting some negative behavior pattern, something about a sinful people, read that about yourself and pray to have the remedy. Pray to be protected from from experiencing those sinful, dirty behaviors, and to not engage in those unhealthy and toxic behaviors towards self and others. And then when you read about positive stories, to pray that you would cultivate those qualities and share those qualities, and that others would benefit from them. And that you too would be a mercy, you would receive mercy and be a mercy to others, inshallah. We need to think in this manner, because we have to survive and thrive these times. And the way that we are going to overcome this is by actually embodying the qualities, traits, characteristics, and of the prophets. Peace be upon all of them, of our Nabi, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's very important that we live these principles. It's not just about imitating, certain things that we've learned from Hadith, but it's really about the purification process. The only way to break this black magic spell is through individual and collective Tawba and tazkiya. Tawba meaning to turn away from anything that is unhealthy in thought, word, and deed, anything that's toxic in thought, word, and deed toward oneself and toward others. And then purifying ourselves bodily, body and mind. We also need to purify our traditions. We need to purify our families. We need to purify our households. Anything that is cancer-causing, toxic, unhealthy, we need to purify our household and get rid of all that garbage and replace it with the healthiest possible inputs. We need ethical and pure inputs and ethical and pure output. This is the only way that we are going to overcome and defeat the nefs that incites to evil. There's an individual nefs that incites to evil and a collective one. That we each contribute toward this false sense of self, where what happens is we create a false, inaccurate imagination or understanding of systems, of nations, and it's an idol-making process. And we have to tear down the idols within our heart. Within the Kaaba, we have to tear down those idols. We have to be aware, there's the truth of who Allah is. And Allah is the compassionate, the wise, the healer, the protector, the guide, the kind, the merciful, the forgiving, the just. He is the wrathful one. We are not to be the wrathful one. However, it's interesting to note that if people are declaring genetic modification, if they're declaring that to be halal, and they're encouraging Muslims to take this genetic modification, there will be instances where as soon as people see the real results and how it negatively impacts and harms their loved ones, then many people are going to they're going to flip out. And we're going to be seeing some really messed up things happen. And then people are going to be like, oh, look, it's the Muslims or it's the Christians. They're doing crazy things. We need to be aware of these things, people. I'm going on these little tangents and everything, but ultimately, one of the main points is that we must be people of truth, and we need to look at the issue of slavery carefully, because the issue of slavery, first, it's a dominant issue because we're dealing with the transhuman agenda, where the goal is to enslave the humanity that is not wiped out. And then as societies break down, we're going to see the Sufyanis arise. Now, potentially. So when I tend to read, I read a lot of, I study eschatology, and I have since I was a little boy. And, so all things eschaton, all things end of days, end of times, which I see as a key transition point. It's the point where we are moving toward, we're evolving or devolving, this devolution or evolution. And this evolution it's not linear Darwinian evolution. It's a maturation process. And it's basically where we are moving to a status as mature, purified human beings. We are moving toward being higher than the angels in status. And in a devolved state, we are lower than the beast. Notice the mark of the beast talk that's going on, and the beast system talk, and the beast of the earth, and all these different things. We must consider these things, and we need to think about these things in a literal sense, in a symbolic sense. We need to think holistically, and we need to analyze holistically. We are people of balance. We are people of the middle path. We are people of moderation. And so we need to look and we need to study the etymologies. We need to study the context. We need to flip things from various angles and study it. So when I look at, say, the stories of the Sufyani, we could read this many different ways, but consider that each character in the Quran and in the Hadith, we could also read them as collectives in certain instances. We can read things physiologically. There are some really interesting ways to read the Quran and read the world around us. And it's not about being like, just doing symbolic readings, and being what they call them, the botanis, like in a smiley type, it's like this is, but we shouldn't neglect the symbolic readings. And I'm very concerned that there's a potential collective of Sufyanis, people who they basically take a righteous role. They look like they're religious and righteous, and they've got Hadith and Quran in their mouth, and then they're going to behave in unethical and impure ways, and they're going to fill in as soon as the power vacuum arises. They're going to try to fill that in and basically rise to power and gain authority. And we've already seen instances in Libya and in Syria where when these people get into power, and many of them, it's interesting, how many of them are connected to. They never make Islam look good. So that's kind of interesting. They never make Muslims look good. So it's like you have to question, are these really Muslims? And then the people who have been influenced by close-hearted readings of the traditions, close-minded readings of the traditions in the Quran, it's like it's a self-limiting, it's self-limiting, and it limits us. It's like people have limited Allah. Astaghfirullah. People have limited Allah. And they've limited our potential as humans. And they've limited who we are as an ummah. We have to be aware of what I call the Islamic idolatries. We have to be very, very concerned about, are we worshiping Allah? Are we devoted to Allah as truth? Or is this a false Zeus in the sky Allah? The concept of the Ummah can be an idol. The concept of Sahih Hadith can be an idol. These are obstacles preventing us, they're veils preventing us from seeing Allah as is. And it's very important that we consider these things, and we need to destroy these idols in our hearts first and foremost. If people are parading out if people have a false sense of the prophets or a false sense of our Nabi, peace be upon all of the prophets, then an inaccurate view, an unhealthy worldview automatically leads to unhealthy thoughts, unhealthy words, and unhealthy practices and behaviors. We need to be as ethical and as pure right now. We need to come into our true maturity as Muslims, as individuals, and as an ummah people. This is very important. And we need to lead by example. And inshallah, we will do this. We need to transform very quickly. And we need to be very honest. We need to look at how we've behaved in the past. People have made this, the Sahaba an idol in certain instances and view them in very inaccurate ways, and then you've got the opposition to that as well, where it's kind of like when if we look at the nafs, oftentimes we've got an overly inflated sense of who we are or an exaggerated, deflated sense. So we, a self-deprecating, self-hating, or self-loving approach, and neither are accurate. Because we need to dissolve any false sense of who we are, and be empty of all that is not truth. We have to be empty of anything that is not truth. We have to dissolve and empty all falsehood, all inauthenticity, all toxicity, all unhealth. And the word health is related to the word heal, and related to the word healing and the word whole, and whole making, wholeness. So we need to repair our brokenness. We're a broken ummah. We're a broken people all across the planet. And I'm not just trying to criticize us as an ummah, because many of these arguments would very much apply to the Christians and the post-Christians as well. We all come from the prophetic tradition. And many people actually have quite a bit of the prophetic tradition that they're still applying in daily life. I mean, even what's going on with with communism. Communism is basically it's a lot like an apocalyptic prophetic approach. It's rooted in kind of an eschaton worldview. It's an apocalypse, and we need to move into a golden age, and there's a concept of justice and righteousness, and look how many people have been murdered in the name of this atheistic God and religion hating tradition that's ultimately a human hating tradition, and it's always bad for ecosystems. But we need to be very honest about who we are and who we've been. And so just to bring it back to the issue of slavery, you know, in the last video, I said that I thought that the various caliphates actually were stopped dead in their tracks and began deteriorating and losing power over time, and brought in the Ummah ultimately brought into a state of great disrepair, I should say, and humiliation and colonialization, because as an Ummah, we had engaged in so much slavery for profit. We'd harmed so many walis. People were treated like cattle. Even if you argue that there were certain restrictions and rules, that doesn't mean that we're not up in people's households. We don't know how people are behaving, but there's still an energetic effect. And so just because something should be a certain way doesn't mean that it is. And ultimately, the themes of the Quran, if we study the themes of the Quran, first off, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Everything is about mercy and compassion. And the Quran is all about justice and taking care of the weak and the oppressed and the vulnerable, the poor, the widows, the orphans. These principles, we start expanding them. And Islam is to minimize harm and minimize suffering in all instances. Islam, we are to, the Ummah, our goal, one of the underlying principles is to eliminate all forms of tyranny, oppression, and enslavement within. We should be a slave to no one, to no system, to no ideology, to no idea, to no concept, to no individual, to no company, to no country. We should be a slave to nothing and no one ever, only to truth. That's when we talk about being servants of Allah, being an Abdullah, and all of the different names of Allah fit within, all the beautiful names fit within, the word Allah is kind of all encompassing. So, the Abduls, you could basically say that all of them are equivalent to Abdullah. So, anyway, so I'm kind of, there's so much that I want to share with you. And what I want to say is that to break this black magic spell, we have to, if the big sin of the Ummah is that if there's even the potential for this, we need to address it in a serious manner. If as an Ummah, a large percentage of people were harming walis, and engage in order to hold slaves, that means that people have to do dirt. They have to actually hurt and harm people, and they have to scare people in order to stay slaves. And we do have lots of evidence that there was horrific plantation slavery in a number of areas, and we've got tons of historic documentation about Muslims doing slave raids all over Africa, in Asia. We've got in South Asia, it was regular that the Muslim conquerors that went into South Asia, because this was a very wealthy area, they would enslave 100,000 people at once. This was not people being turned into butlers and cooks. We're talking about people were exploited for sexual slavery, for physical labor, to sell to other peoples. It was a very lucrative trade, and it's always riba, because anytime that we take the labor and the free will and the free opportunity of any individual, then we are taking interest on something. So if you purchase a person, or if you fight and use blood, sweat, and tears, and then you gain that person, no, that will never be enough, because that human is made in the image of Allah. That human is made, according to some of the hadith, and maybe these are da'if, I don't know for sure, but they speak to me, that Allah's very hands all the qualities of mercy and wrath and judgment and all the different qualities, the different names were molded into our melanated clay and water. This is a beautiful thing. So we were programmed with that clay, and all that clay and water already is created through kun. So it has the sacred vibration of B within this. It's kun created clay, and then we have ruh blown into us. So it's like just one step after the other. So, and we are, we're laid out in the image so Allah, the same way that we would create a statue, So that's where you get the word image. So we've got this concept of we are made like a statue, and then Allah animates us with ruh. This is beautiful. Now, this whole concept of the image also, when you look at words, every letter, in the Latin alphabet, in the Arabic alphabet, letters, they represent sounds, and some sounds represent concepts. Especially in combination, they represent concepts. And originally, languages were written with, oftentimes referring to things in nature, like animal tracks, pictorial depictions so a picture held stories or ideas within it, pictograms. So they were images. These symbols, these signs are images of sorts. So to bring it back to the point I was making, to enslave a human is to enslave the image of Allah. How could you ever pay for the image of Allah through blood, sweat, and tears, or through gold and silver? How could you justify that? That's always, you're purchasing with interest, because you'll never be able to pay that interest. You will never touch the value. One human being is worth more than this entire dunya. This dunya is not worth one human. We need to be using our resources to free people. Not only was Islam pre-programmed with Quranic themes and in our very clay to gradually eliminate all human slavery and prevent it from ever arising again, but to eliminate all forms of enslavement and humiliation and enforced servitude. There should be no debt slavery. Matter of fact, we've got more than enough wealth within the Ummah from oil and materials and minerals. Those don't belong to families and nation states. They belong to the Ummah. To the Ummah. The Ummah is those people, they're just trustees. And let's leave it to another video to consider whether they are actually doing a good job as trustees, or have they done a good job as trustees, because that wealth is held for humanity. Because the greater Ummah is all of humanity. The greater Ummah is not yet awakened. We are responsible for awakening and maturing as an Ummah, and then to awaken, to assist in the awakening and maturation process of all of humanity through mercy, compassion, and justice. If we demonstrate these things, imagine if it's not just that Muslims were to free slaves from their own households in order to, they did a big sin, so I'm going to go free a slave today, and hopefully Allah will accept my show of repentance. We need to be going and not only freeing people worldwide, we need to be demonstrating excellence worldwide. Always. If we're behaving in unethical and impure ways, that makes Islam, it makes Muslims, it makes the Ummah look like hypocrites. It makes us look like savages and barbarians. That is not who we are. That's not who we're meant to be. Prophetic excellence, beautification, the Jibreel alayhi salam hadith. This is so critical, people. It's so important. And, I've been I've been trying to say that, because we're facing these two disasters of the transhuman depop and enslavement agenda and the Sufyanis. The Sufyanis, this is a very distinct possibility, and I think that it might actually shock some of the people who have been thinking in dirty, dark ways that they actually might be a Sufyani. We need to be very honest with ourselves. We need to read the Quran as a mirror, and we need to to read everything around us as signs and symbols, and we need to read our inner signs. Read, so it's like we need to study everything around it. Read all of reality. One of the ways that, know yourself to know your Lord. Your Lord is, where you direct your devotion to, what your Qibla is, and so we direct our attention and our devotion toward truth, not to falsity, not to inauthenticity. We not to the modified route. We take the organic, pure route. Purity and ethics are absolutely critical. We have to engage in Tawba and tazkiya now, people. This is literally, I mean, I might be sounding like a broken record, but I do not hear the alims calling for Tawba and tazkiya. I'm not, and this is very important. We must do this. We need to eliminate all forms of enslavement. We are to be servants of nothing but truth. So we need to be reading all of reality, and in order to see, are we directed to truth? This needs to be the goal. This needs to inform our scholarship. It needs to inform our behavior. Let me just check my notes real quick. This black magic spell can be broken through Tawba and tazkiya. That's literally the only way. This is the prophetic tradition, the prophetic path. Every prophet goes through that personal process and then calls people to it. So they live by example. They don't just call people to Tawba and tazkiya and they haven't been through it personally. The prophets always go through a dark night of the soul. They go through a difficult period in their life where and they're constantly repenting. And repentance means turning away from anything that's unhealthy and toxic in thought, word, or deed towards self and others, and engaging in healthy, purifying behaviors toward others and themselves. So we need to repent for our personal and our collective wrongs. We need to look at this slavery issue and look at it. You know what? It's like in the West, we're clearly like, I come from a Christian background, Western background. First off, we got to catch the Christians doing things right. Now, the Christians have theological issues and a number of issues. Like one thing, they're lacking in practice. We can actually inspire them to practice more strongly, to have, because standing, bowing, sitting and prostrating in prayer, glorification, asking for forgiveness, praising, these are all part of the biblical and prophetic tradition across space and time. And so is fasting, from food and drink for periods of time, as well as from, fasting is a way of purifying our words, purifying our actions, purifying our thoughts. All these things we can help them with, but some of the things they did well, like within the Western Protestant Christian tradition, sadly, they kept the old Roman Catholic original sin conceptualization, where seeing humanity as innately evil and wrong and sinful, which is very, very deeply troubling and problematic. It's so problematic. And that's why the conceptualization of innate fitra is very important. Innate purity. It's really, really key. But what they did do correct is the slavery abolition movement to end slavery across the world. It's largely comes out of this Western Protestant Christian tradition. There's a prophetic undercurrent hidden within Christianity. And so you will meet Christians that are people of heart, that are very kind-hearted. I've met many. I've also met many that were hypocritical and that were problematic. And that led me to actually really question the background that I had. And I had to read the Bible for myself. I really believed. And that led me to Islam. But my view of Islam is very expansive. And it includes the broader prophetic tradition. And so I'm looking for the prophets all over the place. In the Taoist tradition, the Buddhist tradition, all these different areas, I'm looking, and I measure things against the Quran, and utilizing, refining my reasoning and my intuition as best as possible, inshallah. We have so much potential, people, tremendous potential. And let me just make sure I've covered these things. Remember, the worst form of riba is human enslavement. We're facing a potential reemergence of slavery on a world scale, unprecedented in recorded human history. My belief is that Islam has a fundamental duty to minimize, eliminate, and prevent all forms of exploitation, tyranny, oppression, enslavement. We are to protect the weak, the vulnerable, and the innocent at all costs. Overall, we have missed the mark, which is an old way to define sin, and lost many opportunities to heal hearts, harmonize, and make right what was long wrong. So think about that for a second. We have missed opportunities. And now we have a new opportunity. Allah has brought this issue of slavery back into focus because we're facing worldwide enslavement. So now we've got to think very carefully, how do we not only prevent enslavement, but make sure that it never rises again? We must eradicate this desire and this delusion within our hearts. I've met brothers that deep down they've got a fantasy about having their sex slaves. They want some concubines. You think that that's not really happening? You know you've had those conversations. We need to be honest with ourselves. It's dirty and it's wrong. Slavery is not okay in any shape or form. We've already seen slavery raise its ugly head in Syria, Libya. In the Sudan and Mauritania, it's never fully disappeared. We've seen variations within the Gulf region and in the Middle East. And it's interesting that many of the women who suffer from different kinds of sexual trafficking and sexual exploitation that moves within the realms of sex slavery, they come from the Christian Slavic and the Christian Filipino background. You know what I mean? It's like, so we're seeing Christian women exploited. These are peoples of the book. And how does that make us look if Muslims are harming Christians? You know, it's like the best dawah is actually to live a beautiful and excellent life. And we need to free people from anything that is humiliating. We should never be humiliating. That's so disgusting. Our role is not to humiliate. I hear too many, when I go online and look at comments and watch videos, I am shocked. Some of the biggest mockers, the atheists and the witches and these kind of people, they're big time mockers, but so are the Muslims. There are a lot of Muslims online that are engaged in mockery and really, really saying some horrible things. And you could argue, oh, those are some people pretending to be Muslims. And in some cases, this is actually true because people want to make Muslims look bad. But I'm blown away by how often I'm seeing people that have like this scholarly status and they feel so comfortable mocking others. They're so disrespectful, and that does not remind me of any prophet. Peace be upon the prophets. All right, so if you haven't been looking into the transhuman agenda, it's really important. Patented transhumans can be owned. This is related to GMO seeds. We need to really, really eliminate any genetically modified foods and substances from our homes and from our bodies. And we need to consider how we've been mind controlled in various ways and break the conditioning and break the mind control as much as possible. This is super important. And that's why I'm saying it's like if we are seeking truth and we commit ourselves to truth and we actually say, you know what, our ummah has engaged in sin, we commit to not only, all right, so just consider this. I mentioned this in another video, but if you have any good qualities within you, any excellent qualities within you, those are from your ancestors. They literally came to you through your ancestors, not only genetic ancestors, but through we have different kinds of ancestries through nature and nurture. So in other words, the nature is the genetics. So you receive these good qualities from your ancestors through nature. Now from nurture, those are the environmental inputs. Those are from, like say teachers and acquaintances, people that you meet at church or mosque or whatever, or out in the community. And some of them are it's like you could get ancestral inputs from other people. Now we're all interconnected. And so this is a very fascinating thing to consider. And also when we're talking nature, that's also can be ecological inputs. Like we live within ecosystems. And so the water, the air, the food, all these things have profound impact on our bodies and our minds. So we need to consider these things and these look at me, I wandered off with it. But you know what? It's all right. I'm just freestyling. I'm speaking from the heart. I love you. I mean, I really, really, we have so much potential. You are really, really loved. I'm saying these things to you because I really believe in us. And I want to see us achieve our potentials. And I want to see us survive these times. I do not want to see us wipe. We are so close to reaching our potential as human beings and achieving a new maturity. There's so much potential that we have. Why would Allah bring us through this whole path of so much suffering and difficulty and struggle just to let some really, really weak-looking supervillains modify us and enslave us and wipe us all out? Now, the reality is that we're likely going to be seeing a lot of people die. We have to be very honest with ourselves, and many of our leaders and scholars have really, really not only let us down, but actively led us down a dark path. Some of them knew better and were on the take. This is going to be exposed. It's coming to light. Some of them have already started to be exposed. They've sold us out. Others, it was unintentional. They had good intentions, and they just, they might know Hadith well or Quran well, or they know their prayers well enough to be an imam at their local masjid, but they believe they're doctors. Their medicine cabinet's full of pharmaceuticals, and they don't even realize that they're actually causing themselves cancer in the long run, and all kinds of illnesses. They're destroying their immune systems, whatever. They don't know what the point is that many people that are leading us astray, they do not know that. They have good intentions, but it's like that old English saying, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Many people have good intentions, and they're going toward hellfire, and they're leading people toward hellfire. It's like, please consider that there are so many walis among us, so many friends of Allah that are hidden amongst us, and if they have been enslaved and hurt and harmed, then Allah notes these things. You know what I mean? There's cause and effect coming. And I think that we've actually suffered as an ummah because many walis were hurt and harmed through the enslavement process. The Muslim slave, comparing Islamic slavery and Christian slavery, they're interrelated. And you've got a lot of, characters playing, they're working on both sides of this and, benefiting from all sides of the slave trade. And many people would be interested in becoming Muslims. And then they see this slave issue, and then they're really appalled and blown away by Muslims making apologetic arguments in favor of it or trying to justify it, which is crazy to me. How about we acknowledge what has happened in an honest way and really make amends and purify ourselves of it and make sure that it never rises again? I want to see the Christians do this as well. There's never been a Tawba and tazkiya movement among the masses of Christians, although some of the abolitionists did do that. We need to catch the Christians doing the right thing. They did the right thing in that, and also there's an apocalyptic, many of them are hardcore into studying eschatology, and they knew about the mark of the beast, and they are not taking genetic modifications, and they're willing to die for this. And you're going to disrespect them for that? Are you serious? People, you got to understand. Look for people who are the people closest to us in heart. You know what I mean? It's like people. These are not just monks from hundreds of years ago. It's like the Quran is cyclic, and it's self-referencing, and it's cross-referencing, and it spirals, and there are simultaneous truths within it across space and time. It's very profound. It's not a typical book. And we have not learned how to read it properly. There's so many aspects of Quran that will unfold before us, but we need to purify our traditions. It's like, imagine if there's some really dirty things we need to take a close look at and see, do they actually match up with the Quran? Do they match up with what we know about the excellent characteristics and qualities of our Nabi? People are like people look and they say, oh, our Nabi, peace and blessings be upon him. He was a slave holder. He was all kinds of horrible things. And all they got to do is look into a Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. And I know you could go and be like, oh, you got scholars that they argue that, well, that's not really, a Sahih Hadith, but it's in the collections, and it's because of the printing press and the internet. It's available, widely available, and many Muslims are interpreting these things. We need to take an honest look at our traditions, and we need to purify our traditions. We need to make Tawba and tazkiya in regard to our very foundational documents. Look at them carefully. Like, so for instance, the Quran has been preserved, but many interpretations of the Quran, many of the tafsirs, those are informed by certain corrupt hadith. So for instance, the Sahabis, they didn't always understand the words that were used, the Arabic words, even though they spoke classical Arabic. So certain hadith might be related to the wording, and that would lead to an interpretation, or they would, there would be interpretations from the hadith about certain ayat. And we have to consider these factors. We need to look at, the impact of classical Arabic poetry. It's like, the thing is, we are perfect in our deen is perfect in potential, but it has not yet been actualized. And part of actualizing and coming into our maturity is actually to use the themes of the Quran to reread things and purify ourselves. I'm very confident in this. We need to learn how to, this body, our bodies, the sacred clay holds so many important truths that we, that will help us to practically problem solve our way through this time period. And we've got the prophecy suggests we're going to make it through, but a lot of humans are not going to make it through, and a lot of Muslims are not going to make it through. When we look at the statistics, the Arab world is wow. It really, really is crazy that they are like, it's like they are fully like, the Arabian Peninsula, apart from like Yemen is a war zone. It's interesting to me that war zones have been largely protected from these modifications. That's really bizarre. That's wild. And anyway, Here's something regarding the war zones. Think of taking and giving of riba. To gain slaves historically usually meant capture in war raids and through debt, which invariably meant high interest loans unpaid. To take an unjust, excessive, interest-bearing, accumulative, and exploitative profit is not only riba defined, but describes human enslavement quite accurately, wherein men, women, and children are often utilized as sexually exploited, forced labor, with no personal return on their blood, sweat, and tears for years, and often for the entirety of their lives. The interest is taken from involuntary labor of the enslaved. They get no return on their labor, while the owner gets it all. Even if a slave is allowed to earn off plantation and saved to buy their freedom, the earned funds go back to the master every step of the way. Even the amount paid to buy their freedom is a perverse and insane amount of interest to pay for all they've suffered and lost as a slave, and typically far beyond the amount the owner paid or suffered to bring a human into bondage and to keep them in such a degraded state. Is this not excessive, accumulative, exploitative profit? So the slave has interest taken from their flesh, as if they are not human but cattle. And what does the Quran say about taking flesh from the living creature for food and mutilating them in any way? It's like many African men were castrated. And you could argue, well, sometimes the castration took place, on the selling end, And so, other groups, non-Muslim groups, would sometimes castrate the men so that they could be sent into the Muslim world, because the Muslims didn't want to get their hands dirty. And yet the Muslims had established a market for those castrated slaves. So therefore, those who established the market are guilty of the sin. And those participating in the market are guilty of the sin. And those who justified these atrocious, horrific practices are guilty of sin. Have you made the ulama and the alims a god in your heart? Think about it. Have you made an idol of the ulama, of the shaykhs, many of whom participated in these slave trades and took benefit from it? This is highly problematic. We need to be really real with ourselves, and because we need to be. We're making collective Tawba and tazkiya. Those of us who are going to make it through this, inshallah, We're going to seek purification and nearness to Allah, and Allah is the truth, and the truth is compassionate, merciful, and just. Also, we've got the issue of the orphans. Slaves are effectively disconnected from their family and kin groups in most cases, and so they are orphaned. So they're effectively orphaned. So the slaver eats the wealth of the orphan, which is their very life force. What does the Quran and Hadith say of such a sin? The slave not only loses all and gains little, if anything, from the experience, but when wronged, they have little to no recourse to address such wrongs. This is in all systems, including Islamic, wherein corrupted and compromised qadis and judges and authorities were often complicit beneficiaries of the trade and exploitation of human slave labor and services. Muslims have spent far too much time and energy smashing the wrong idols, being dishonest with themselves about real evil in their midst because they hold credentials and a nice turban. So we need to consider, us being Allah's ongoing creation, our very lives. It's ongoing creation. This is really a beautiful thing to contemplate. It's very powerful. We need to make sure that we have not created idols from the Hadith collections. Matter of fact, by purifying the Hadith, by seeing how compatible they are with Quran and with the ethics, the ethical themes within the Quran and within the broader prophetic tradition, which we can purify through comparative study of world religions. We can actually find, because we look at these other traditions and say, oh, they've been compromised and corrupted, their scriptures and their traditions. And this is true in certain instances, but many of those things, through scholarly analysis, we have tools that we can actually find things that we can find what is in harmony with the Quran, universal truths, universal ethical principles, valuable insights that then can help to shed light on things that we may have missed within Quran, that we didn't notice the beauty and the depth of it. So the other thing is, as we look and see that there were certain chains of narration that were copy and pasted, that what happens is that certain matins had been corrupted and really dark, devilish stuff was inserted. So we pull those out, and what happens is then it's still going to leave so many hadith that are actually applicable to problem solving in our lives and beneficial and in harmony with the Quran. We might find that certain da'if hadith and rejected hadith are compatible with the Quran and really practical for our usage and beneficial. This is interesting. And then many Sahih and Hasan hadith will be left, and then they will be strengthened by also having that chain of narration. So I'm not talking about eliminating hadith by any means, but we need to purify how we read these things and think about these things. We need to think about the wali factor. We have to think about the lucrative nature of slaving and how that impacted, how that really, in a real world, how it actively influences how people behave. If there's financial or power benefit to be gained, people will justify all kinds of dark things. We need to protect our community from this. I'm really trying to encourage us to not only purify ourselves of anything that is unhealthy and toxic within our bodies, our minds, within our collective, but and to be of benefit to ourselves and to other communities. This is the most effective dawah. We need to engage in freeing people and giving genuine, heartfelt charity. And I'm not just talking about money, but I'm talking in terms of how we live and behave. We need to uproot anything that's unhealthy. And we can't be justifying these things. Like, the thing is, many of these scholars who have been justifying dark things, they've exposed themselves now, and they're about to expose themselves even more, because this is the time of revealing. And this is their last chance for Tawba and tazkiya, because it's about to really, really be seen. The light's coming on, people. So if you're following people who are suggesting that you do things that in your heart you feel might be unethical and wrong, really, really think about this. Sit with this. Pray about it. Look into the Quran, because a lot of times they're using really dark interpretations of the Quran. And this black magic spell has been upon us for quite a long time, people. It can be broken. It's not an easy process. We've got very little time now. We need to be spending a lot of time in sajda, A lot of times standing in prayer, a lot of times sitting and contemplating. Contemplate your breath, contemplate your body's sensations, contemplate your thought process. Contemplate your emotional states. Be present with everything that you're doing and appreciative. Be present and appreciative while you wash dishes, while you clean your baby, while you wash your clothes, while you're driving your car. Find reasons to give thanks constantly. You're actually doing dhikr Allah and remembering Allah by focusing on body sensations and breath, by focusing on your movement and stillness. When you contemplate your positions in prayer, contemplating your body, say for instance, during pauses, and you just go and relax into your body and observe the sensations, observe the expansion and contraction as your belly breathes, at the vibrations in your chest as you recite the Quran as beautifully as you can. Allah will bring you into insight, and then spend extra time in sajda. That's where a lot of the insights will arise, and we have to break this black magic spell. It's upon not just the ummah, but the collective, all of humanity, and it's negatively impacting all of Allah's creation, and we are to protect all of Allah's creation. This is very real. We have to make hijrah of the heart, people. We have to leave these spiritually unhealthy states behind. It's overwhelming when you look at what's going on in the world. But there is hope. But it begins each one of us has the ability to make the decision. You know what? I'm going to change for the better. I'm going to use my time wisely. I'm going to appreciate the beauty of Allah's nature. I'm going to get out in nature. I'm going to appreciate this conversation. I'm going to appreciate this cup of tea, this bite of food. We have a potentially transformative path, people. You are greatly loved. You are deeply appreciated. I've rambled on for quite a while, but this is the issue of slavery is super important. And the issue of truth it all comes down to truth. Allah is truth most high. The supreme truth, the absolutely unique, the ever living, the creator, the destroyer, the vivifier, the resurrector, all these beautiful names. It's contemplate these names and then contemplate them in relationship to your very life, how each name relates to your body and your mind and your experience in life. Sit in nature, sit in a garden and really, really consider these things. We've got very little time. We need to break free from all forms of enslavement, mental enslavement, financial enslavement, emotional enslavement, genetic enslavement, nutritional enslavement. Any type of enslavement, we need to see clearly for what it is, and we need to see the roots of it in a very clear, real way. And we need to not only help ourselves, but help others. So don't pray for what you want anymore. Pray for what you need. And not just pray for what you need, pray for what we need. May we come out of this enslavement. May we come out of this misery. May we stand as mature, enlightened human beings, as mature Muslims. May Allah guide us. May Allah protect us. May we be among the sincere. May we be among the pure-hearted ones. May we be among the peacemakers and the harmonizers. May we be rectified and made whole. May we stand upright. May we live righteously and purely and beautifully. May we give honor and praise to truth and truth alone. May we see falsity and idolatry for what it is, because people have misimagined what idolatry is. People think that it's all statues, and it's not. It's so much more. And there are such a thing as Islamic idolatries. I'm not saying that Islam is an idol, because Islam is a real way of living and a healthy way of living. I would define it as the prophetic path of purification and perfection. This is a beautiful path, people. I'm so thankful to be walking it with you. So Let's do everything that we can to make best use of this time, and to do so with strong determination to be the most excellent creatures that we can be, to honor our Creator, which is always truth. It's truth and truth alone. How Allah has done it, we can observe, and we can observe nature and study it and learn many things. There's so much more to learn. There is so much that we have not learned yet. But I guarantee it's not the transhuman route, not the AI route. These devils are trying to destroy us and prove that Iblis is correct and that the jinn are supreme, and they are not. The jinn supremacists are supreme, I should say. May we come out of all of our miseries, and may we see clearly. May we direct our life toward truth as it is. May we live beautifully. May we be purified. May we be made whole and rectified. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is your brother Ilyasin, and we are the Deep Roots Movement.